I was visiting the Woodford Reserve distillery, and when the tour came to an end, the guide opened up the floor to questions from the guests. I raised my hand as there was something that had been burning on my mind for some time. He called on me, and I stood up and spoke. I heard a rumor that Woodford Reserve's bourbon has 200 detectable flavor notes, I said. But I've looked and looked, and I can't seem to find them all. Do you know what all of them are? He looked intently at me and paused for a moment before responding. Woodford Reserve's complete list of tasting notes is a closely guarded secret, and we're very careful about who we reveal them to. It isn't something we make public, since who knows what could happen if that information were to fall in the wrong hands. This discouraging response weighed heavily on me as the guide formally dismissed the guests. As they all began filtering out, I slowly began to make my own way out of the distillery. But before I could reach the exit, the tour guide grabbed me by the arm and pulled me aside. I probably shouldn't be doing this, he said, but do you want to see the full flavor note list? Of course I did, and I told him so. Come with me, he said. I followed him through the distillery, and we took the elevator to the second basement level. After walking down a long corridor, we came to a large heavy metal door, and the guide was required to input an access code and submit to a retinal scan in order to unlock it. A moment later, I heard the whir and ka-chunk of the door's inner mechanisms releasing, and he slowly pulled it open as the door's weight resisted him. We walked into a room that was almost completely empty, except for a raised podium in the center that was behind a velvet rope and lit overhead by a single lamp. Come this way, he said, and motioned for me to come deeper into the room. We approached the podium, and I saw that on top of it lay a scroll that was covered in handwritten script. The paper was aged and browning. Some of the edges were torn, and there was discoloration in a few places. This is the complete record of all known Woodford Reserve flavor notes. Our workers have been diligently compiling this list ever since distilling began here in 1812. It's taken us generations to build this up, so you can understand why this is such a closely guarded secret. I leaned in so that I could get a better look at the document and took another bite of my hot dog. To my dismay, a huge blob of ketchup and mustard squirted out the back of the bun and splattered right in the center of the page, soiling a large section of the flavor notes. "What have you done?" the tour guide exclaimed. "I never should have brought you here." We stood there in stunned silence for a few minutes before the tour guide finally looked up at me again and spoke. "I know what we need to do. We can fix this. Come with me." We carefully placed the scroll in a plastic bag, rushed out of the distillery, and hopped in my car. "I know an amateur archivist," he said. "It is short notice, but she might be able to help us." He made a phone call, and after a brief conversation, we drove to a secluded location and met a cloaked woman in a dark alley. I couldn't see clearly what she looked like as a hood cast a shadow over most of her face. "Here's the document," the guide said, handing her the bag. She asked him only one question. "Do you have the money?" The guide turned to me and said, "She needs $500 to restore it. You're to blame here, so I think you should cover the cost." That stung, but of course he was right, so I reached for my checkbook. Hopefully the parchment repairs will be finished before she discovers the funds aren't in my account. We handed her the bag and the check and went our separate ways. I dropped the tour guide off at his apartment, and I returned to my own home. I was so exhausted after the day's events that I fell into a deep sleep almost immediately after stretching out on the couch. In the middle of the night, I awoke to the sound of my phone ringing. I checked the time and saw that it was 4:23. Who could be calling me at this hour? I answered, and it was the tour guide on the other end. "Something's happened," he said. "Can you meet me right away?" Grudgingly, I agreed and wrote down the address he provided. When I pulled up to the location, I had some misgivings because it looked like this was the storefront to a dry cleaner's. But when I saw the guide come around the corner, I knew I was in the right place. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. We waited silently for a minute before the woman we met earlier opened up from inside the shop. "What happened? What's the problem?" the guide asked, once we were inside. The woman looked down at the ground for a moment before speaking. "I know I said I was an archivist, and I let you believe that I could restore ancient documents, but that's not entirely true. I'm actually just a dry cleaner." "What?" the guide said in disbelief. The woman went on. "I started cleaning the parchment, and at first the ketchup and mustard stain was coming off beautifully, but I don't know. I just kept cleaning. I must have gotten carried away." "What did you do?" the guide asked. The woman didn't answer, but instead walked off to the back room and returned with the scroll. She handed it over, and we stared at it in disbelief. Now there was nothing on the document, no writing at all. "I did clean it," the woman said. "But I cleaned it too much. I cleaned it all." We stood there in shock. "What do we do now?" I asked the guide. He furrowed his brow, rubbed his chin, and finally looked back up at me. "I have an idea. Come with me." "Can I come too?" the woman asked. "No," the guide said. "You've done enough." We climbed back into my car and started driving. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Back to my place," he answered. "But for what?" I pressed. "We're gonna recreate those tasting notes," he declared confidently. "Every last one of them." "But how would that even be possible?" I objected. "It took generations to assemble that list." "I know," the guide said. "But in 24 hours, the master distiller's gonna walk back into that room to check in, and if he doesn't find this document on that pedestal with all 200 flavor notes on it, I fear for my safety. And for yours." The gravity of the situation dawned on me, so I protested no further. We went back to his apartment, and he pulled out a bottle of Woodford Reserve, 2 glasses, a quill, and a bottle of ink. He poured us both a serving of bourbon. "Time to get to work," he said. We stuck our noses in the glass. "What are you getting?" he asked. "Caramel and brown sugar, of course," I replied. "But also cinnamon, burnt toast, red hots, and grapefruit. What about you?" "I'm getting vanilla, pepper, a little butter, brown bread, orange peel, and a hint of baking soda, weirdly." We sat there nosing and tasting quietly for a few more minutes. "Are you getting anything else?" I stuck my nose in the glass again, but my mind drew a blank. "No," I said. "That's all I've got." "How many do we have so far?" He counted them up. 12. 12? That's it? I exclaimed. "But this stuff is supposed to have 200 flavor notes. How can we be stuck at 12? "I don't know," he replied. "Maybe we have taster's block, but we're not even close. What should we do now?" "I know," I exclaimed. "Let's look at their website. We should add all the notes they have there. They'll be expecting them, right?" "Of course," he said. "That's a good idea." So we scoured Woodford's website and added all the relevant notes and counted them up again. "Where are we at?" I asked. 55, he replied. "Still a long way to go. I think we're going to have to copy tasting notes from rival bourbons just to fill out this list." "You really think that's going to work?" I asked in disbelief. "What if the master distiller reads it and sees tasting notes from Knob Creek or Elijah Craig on it? He'll know it's a forgery." "Maybe," he replied. "Maybe not. But we'll just have to take our chances." So we scoured the websites of a dozen other bourbons and collected every tasting note we could find, even though many were duplicates and couldn't be included. "Where are we at now?" I asked. The guide counted again. "Just over 100. We're still not close." "This is impossible," I shouted in desperation. "We're never going to reach 200. "Yes, we will," he declared firmly. "Here's what I want you to do. Go around my kitchen and read off the names of every food product you see, and I'll write them all down." First, I went to the spice rack. "Do you want all of these?" I asked. "Won't the master distiller get suspicious if he sees cumin, smoked paprika, oregano, and pickling spice on there?" "Maybe," he replied. After reading all the spices from the spice rack, I walked over to the fridge and opened it up. "You want all these too?" I asked. "Even ranch dressing, Dijon mustard, and green olives?" "I want 'em all," he answered. "Even your leftovers? Looks like you've got some beef stroganoff, a jar of hard-boiled eggs, and a half-eaten ham salad sandwich in here." "I said everything," he shouted. After dictating the contents of his fridge to him, I went back to the couch and we counted them all up. "We're getting close. We need just a handful more. Quick, just tell me whatever you see and I'll write it down." I looked out of the window and listed off things like dried leaves, pine cones, rubber tires, bird droppings, a dead chipmunk, and a new mother pushing a baby in a stroller. "How many do we have now?" I asked. 203, the guide said excitedly. "Wait, should we erase those last 3? I asked. "If there are more than 200, won't that arouse suspicion?" "I can't," he said. "It's ink. It doesn't matter anyway. Quick, it's almost dawn. If we hurry, we can put this back before people start arriving for the day." So we raced back to the distillery and placed the forged flavor note document back on the podium where we found it without anyone noticing. Or at least, I don't think anyone noticed. I am worried that if the master distiller actually does read our list, he's going to know right away that it's a fake. And then what will happen to us? I don't even want to think about it. I'm recording this confession in case I suddenly turn up missing. I want people to understand the reason I disappeared. I assume it's only a matter of time before...